So we're going to start with a verse tonight. Before we talk with the story to begin, but tonight we're going to start with this verse from John. It said, "Then Mary took a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odor of the ointment." It's weird, right? Someone comes to your house and you're like, "Let me rub your feet." How many of you would ever do that? Ever? That's what she chose to do. And so first thing we're going to talk about is how it's unique that Mary did this in her way of showing love to Jesus. And then we're going to talk about her gift itself. And then the effect of the gift. But first, a little bit about Mary. She is one of 3 siblings. And her family is made up of 2 sisters and a brother. And their names were Mary, Martha, and the last one you know.
Jane.
Lazarus. And the 2 sisters became really famous over time for entertaining Jesus in their homes. And the brother, whose name I said you're going to know, Lazarus, he is known to us for one really important thing. Who thinks they know what Lazarus is famous for?
He died and came back to life.
He died. But when he died, he didn't stay dead. Because Jesus brought him back. So that's what he's famous for. And if you study the 2 sisters and the brother, you're going to see that they all really loved Jesus a lot. And they loved him in a different way and had a different way of showing their love. And it's the same way with you guys and me and the person next to you. You all have different ways of showing your love. And you all have different ways of receiving love as well. How many of you have ever done the 5 love language thing? Where you know, if you're married, you probably have at some point done it. But the 5 love languages talks about how there's 5 different ways that people receive love. And you could be going over and over again and like, "Hey, I got you this gift. Hey, I got you this gift. Hey, I got you this gift." But if your love language isn't receiving gifts, you're not going to feel loved. Maybe yours is hearing the words, "I love you." And that's all it takes for you to feel loved. There's different ways to show and receive love. And there's different ways to express your love to Jesus in the same way. So for Martha, she's the first one we're going to talk about. Martha served. She was a server. She was a hostess. She was a housekeeper, and she made real good food. Think of the person that makes the best food in your life. The person that when you go to their house, you know you don't have to ask for anything. Because if they see that you have a glass of lemonade that's that far from being done, they'll be like, "I'll just some more lemonade. Here you go." And you have more lemonade, just like that. Or you go to your grandparents' house, and you just think for a half a second that you might be hungry. And all of a sudden, the entire contents of the freezer and the fridge are just laid before you. And they're like, "I don't want you to starve. You're looking skinny. Are you okay?" And you're just like, "Oh, Grandma, you just gave me 50 cookies and now a sandwich." That's a good housekeeper. That's Martha. And Jesus really appreciated her gift. Why do you think Jesus would appreciate the gift of hospitality?
Jesus.
Because he's Jesus, okay? He traveled a lot. And he was real tired. And he was probably hungry. And by the time he got there, he was ready for something. And so, sometimes people talk about Martha, and they talk about how maybe she didn't do enough. And she did her part without speaking. She did her part quietly. She was the person that was in the kitchen the whole time and came out and was like, "Make another sandwich." Goes back in the kitchen, comes back out, "Here's some water," and then you don't see him for like an hour. That was Martha. She was the housekeeper. She was the one that took care of the house. She was the one that was there and you didn't know it, but things got done. Like when you go to a family member's house and they tell you to make your bed, but they never do. And then you go back to bed later at night and you're like, "Oh, my bed's made." That didn't happen by accident. You have a housekeeper or someone that looks out for you, a hostess who's taking care of you, and that's Martha. The second person, Lazarus. He demonstrated his love for Jesus by witnessing. He's the one that went out and told everybody. everybody he could find about Jesus and the things that Jesus had done. And people came all around. So before Lazarus died, he went out and talked to people. Like, he would find them. If the beach was over there and Lazarus knew it, he would be going over there and telling everybody for as long as he could go about Jesus. And then when Lazarus died, and when Jesus brought him back to life, a cool thing happened. He didn't have to go search for people to tell about Jesus anymore, because people wanted to see it. They wanted to know, dude, you died, right? Like, you were buried in a tomb. What's that like? You were dead, and now you're not. You're walking and talking to me. What's up? So he didn't have to go and find people, but people came to him from all around to hear about the man who was raised from the dead, which sounds like a cool movie title, right? The man who was raised from the dead. But he himself was his own evidence of Jesus' miracles. Him just being was his evidence. He didn't have to say anything anymore. Him just walking into a room was his evidence. And when they saw him, imagine you went to someone's funeral, right? You went to their funeral, you cried, you were real sad. And then they walk in that side door. One, we would probably all freak out, right?
The guy's a zombie.
Right. The first zombie, patient zero. But we would all freak out. But then he was like, no, it's cool. I'm alive. Once we changed our pants and our hearts stopped beating a mile an hour or a mile a minute or whatever that saying is, we would want to know. We would want to know what happened. So him just being in a room was his evidence. Just being alive. That's all he needed. And I know there's some of you who are kind of shy. I know there's some of you who don't say much. You might have a million things going up here. And you might have all the love for Jesus in your head and in your heart. But you don't say much. Like, your comfort zone is just here. But to actually get out and talk about it is the scariest thing in the world. And some of us Christians are quiet. But we just go about our business. And we live our daily days. And we live out our witness. But we don't ever talk about it. And then there's Mary. She's the third person, the second sister, the third sibling. But she didn't want to be like Lazarus. She didn't want to be the one that went out and told people about Jesus. Or when people came to the house after he had died, she didn't want to be the one that sat down with them at the table and told her life story. And she didn't want to be in the kitchen with her sister making meals. That wasn't her. Maybe she didn't know how to, or maybe she just didn't want to be. That was Martha's space. And her abilities were different. She had a different way of showing her love. But she didn't necessarily know what it was, but she knew she wanted to express it somehow. And so the burning love in her heart, the thing that compelled her to express her love, she wanted to tell it somehow. She wanted to tell it in some way, but people were already taken care of. They already had all their food. They already had all their drinks. Martha had that on lockdown. And they didn't need to be talked to about Jesus because Lazarus was talking their ears off. And she was drawn to this custom that they had. She locked onto it. It became her thing. And that was anointing guests by anointing them with an oil. And she saw that it hadn't been done yet. Jesus had all his food. He was talking to Lazarus, but she noticed his feet were dirty. Kind of smells bad. And she had to do something about it. See, back then they didn't have cars. They may not have even had camels or mules or donkeys or horses. If they didn't have those things, they walked. And they didn't have Jordans or they didn't have Pumas or whatever it is. They walked in flimsy sandals or barefoot. So everywhere they walked, everything they stepped in, everything they walked through, they smelled like. And she saw, as they're sitting there, that Jesus' feet weren't taken care of. And she knew that when a king went to a new place, when a king went to a different kingdom as a representative, the first thing that would happen to them when they got there is they would have their feet washed. And this is her recognizing Jesus is Lord. Jesus is King. And she wanted to treat him that way. And so she anointed his feet with oil. And she used a pound of oil. A pound. Do you know how much a pound of oil is? A lot. It's a pound. It was a lot of oil. So my family does these oil things, and I don't get them. I don't like them. They smell bad to me. But this is oil. And this is something that my wife rubs on her feet because her feet hurt, and it makes her feet not hurt. I don't know how it works. I don't care. It smells bad to me. But this little vial of oil, how many of you think that's a pound?
It's about an ounce.
It's way less. This little thing is like $60 today. Think about a pound of this stuff way back then. She used a pound of ointment to go on Jesus' feet. And so it was very expensive. It wasn't like she just went in the closet and was like, I'll just use this, I guess. She used the most expensive thing in the house, the thing she spent all of her money on. And so she knew it was expensive. She knew it was costly to her. But she also knew that she needed to give it all to honor him because Jesus was her king. Jesus was her Lord. And Mary's gift proved to be no common gift. She gave everything. That pound of oil might have been, besides clothes that she was wearing, her only possession, other than the food she got the next day. And her gift meant something. Jesus had someone make him supper every day, whether it be himself or another one of the apostles or a disciple or someone's house they stayed in. He had someone that made him food over and over again, just like you guys have someone that makes you food over and over again, or it's yourself. So other people made him food. And other people sat down and talked to Jesus. Other people did that. But no one had anointed his feet. At least not like she did. And hers was an act of a soul on fire. A soul that was giving everything. And it was the deed of a woman who was filled with a deep devotion of overflowing and not just filled with God's love. Do you hear the difference? It wasn't just filled, it was overflowing. And as she sat there and anointed his feet, she got to hear his words. Because if you think Jesus just sat there quietly, it's not the Jesus that we talk about over and over again. Thousands of years later. This is a Jesus who taught. That's what he did. And so as he's sitting there talking at the table with her brother Lazarus, she's even closer than Lazarus because she's washing his feet. And she had seen and understood more about him than maybe some of the other disciples had because she was that close. We talked a little bit about how the disciples knew who Jesus was, but they didn't know who he was at the same time. They knew Jesus, and some of the other people back then, they knew the name Jesus. They knew he was a good teacher, but they didn't know he was the Son of God. This is a woman who knew this is her king. This is her Lord. This is someone that she can put her trust in. And we need to be a group of people, whether it's an adult or a student, we need to be a group of people who are full of enthusiasm and willing to go the extra mile, to overflow with our love for them. And we need people who act as missionaries in their own backyard. And people who take God with them to school or to work or the basketball court or the beach or wherever you go, that you take God with you. And we need Christians who are willing to look public opinion in the face. The things that people say is right, but isn't really. We need Christians who are willing to sit there and be like, that's not right. We need Christians who are willing to stand up for your beliefs. Because we live in a world where there's so many things that people say are right, but the Bible says different. And we need Christians who are filled with a zeal and that are overflowing. Because we talked the last couple days about taking in and filling yourself with Christ. And tonight we're talking about overflowing. Because before you can give out, you must take in. Mary brought out all of her ointment. She didn't leave anything behind. And just like Mary, we need to give God all we have. We need to give him every ability and every power. Use every possession we have for him. We need to give God everything. If she had used half a pound of ointment, do you think it would have probably still been good? What if half a pound only did half a foot? Or 1 foot and he had another one? I don't know how far ointment goes on a foot. I've not done the math. But a half pound may have spoiled the whole thing. Maybe she needed the whole pound to do both of his feet. So when we give our heart to God, should we give him half of our gifts and half our heart and half our attention? If we give God half, are we giving enough? Are we giving the real thing? Is it an unworthy gift if we only give him part? God claims all of you. He claims every part of you to be his. Everything you do is his child doing that thing. He claims all of you, even the dirty parts that we try to hide from everybody else. Even the things we do that we think we do in secret. Jesus knows and loves us even as we do those things. And if we want to fill the house or fill the room with the fragrance, and we have to surrender our whole selves to him. Because there's something else that an ointment does besides clean. In the verse, it talked about the whole house was filled with the odor of the ointment. It spills out. It spills over. She wasn't doing it to make the house smell better. She wasn't doing it to make her house smell like ointment. She wanted to clean the feet of the Lord. But as a byproduct, the house became perfumed. Her intention was to anoint the Lord, but the whole house was filled. She didn't have to run in the room, chasing Jesus down with the thing open and smell going everywhere, just yelling ointment, ointment, I got ointment, I'm gonna rub your feet. Because after she had started, everyone in that house would have known what was going on, even if she didn't say a word. And we don't have to advertise our godliness. We don't have to run into a room waving a Bible and saying, Jesus, Jesus, hear about Jesus. Because if you live it out, people are going to notice things are different. You're going to smell different. Maybe not literally, but you're going to have this air about you that just seems refreshing. And we need to give our love as a sacrifice to Jesus. And as we do that, as we live out our everyday, people are going to see that we're filled with something special, something different. And everyone will start to notice that sweet smell you have, and you'll literally spill out everywhere the love of Jesus in your everyday life. So whether you go to school or work or just to the beach, people are going to notice you're different. So, how far have you gone in your love for Jesus? That's a question you have to ask yourself. Does every one of your family members know that you've made a decision, if you've made a decision? Do all your friends? Does everyone you meet, do they know what's going on? Has your family seen a change in you? And do people at your work or your school or wherever it is, do they see you're different? It's kind of ironic. I didn't give the notes to Jamie or to Caitlin before they chose the songs. But did you notice the song before the theme verse? It went like this. Breathe. Just breathe. Come and rest at my feet. And be. Just be. Chaos calls, but all you really need is to take it in. Fill your lungs. The peace of God that overcomes. Just breathe. Just breathe. Let your weary spirit rest. Lay down what's good and find the best. Just breathe. I love when things like that work out. It's amazing how often in your life, when you're following God's call and when you're speaking, you might not have the words, but God fills in the blanks. When you live it out every day, things just fall into place. I'm not saying it's always going to be easy, because you're still going to have chaos and turmoil. But how you deal with that, how your friends see you deal with that, is going to be the thing that separates you. And they're going to notice something is different. So this oil we have, I want you guys to smell it. So, this robe, come on up. And just hold out your hand. Don't worry. Don't worry.
No bad?
All right, this robe, come on up. Don't worry. It's made to go on your skin.
It smells good. It smells like rosemary.
Second row over here, come on up.
I just don't know about $60 for that. I mean, it does smell really good. Ooh, I like this. It smells good.
Second row over here, come on up. You don't even know what it is. It's lemon.
It smells good. What? It smells like mint chocolate. It's strong. Oh, other side. It does not smell
All right, third row. All right, go ahead and get back to your seats.
What is it?
Go ahead and get back to your seats.
I didn't wash the oil. What is this?
All right. Now that you guys are in complete chaos, let's go ahead and pray. But as we pray, let's do it like the little kids do and fold our hands in front of our face. And breathe.
Just breathe.
Just breathe. Bow your heads. God, help us. Help us to be a light in other people's lives as we are not just filled, but we overflow with your love for them. And help us to be a breath of fresh air in a world that's chaos. And help us, when everything is going crazy around us, to breathe deep and remember that we're your child. In your name we pray.